Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Perspective. We take a little bit of a dive into history, ladies and gentlemen, to try and understand who we are, where we come from. And it all revolves around this entire theory of Aryans versus Dravidians. Aryans were invaders who came to India and civilized this society, because the word Aryan itself is associated with those who are noble or civilized. And there are many Western historians, and some in India too, who have tried to push this Aryan invasion theory. However, there are others who say that if you look at linguistics, then it's the reverse, that it all evolved here in the Gangetic plains of Bharat and then went across to the rest of the world. There is no genetic pool that proves the Aryan invasion theory, nor does any archaeological finding prove it. So let's try and understand, is this entire Aryan invasion theory still not proven? Is it a myth? Was there no Aryan invasion, but it was actually an outgoing out of India? Now the word Aryan itself, according to Anatolians, Iranians and Paurava Indians, means one of us or compatriot. And very interesting, ladies and gentlemen, that Iran itself derives its word from Airayanam Kshatra. That means the place or area where the Aryans lived. Compatriots, people of one particular kind lived. And this is reference there even for this word in the Rig Veda. So, who propounded this entire Aryan invasion theory? 19th century scholars say this theory appeared in the 19th century. It was prevalent till the mid-20th century. These are people, and that's what they said, that they invaded northern India from certain regions, which is now current-day Russia-Ukraine region. They destroyed Harappan culture, is what they say. They destroyed the Indus Valley civilization, dominated Indian religion and culture, and they are the ones who pushed through Sanskrit and Vedic literature. They are the ones who brought knowledge here. They shaped India on Vedic religion. This is what is the claim. Vedic religion was superseded by Hinduism, imposed the Sanskrit language, pushed the caste-based system, pushed Dravidians to the south of the Vindhyas. So this is what they say. Now what do the detractors say? The detractors say this hypothesis was created to justify colonial conquests, invasions. No archaeological or genetic basis to this at all. That is what is said. There are others too, like historians, many political voices, nationally and internationally, who have had various things to say. Max Müller, the German Orientalist, said that Aryans introduced the Sanskrit language. And all of this happened because Europeans realized that a lot of their words find their roots in Sanskrit. So the argument is that it was tried to appropriate it, saying those languages were evolved into Sanskrit and not vice versa. So that's what Max Müller said. Dayanand Saraswati, founder of Arya Samaj, said Aryans came to India from Tibet shortly after the dawn of creation. Bal Gangadhar Tilak said Aryans migrated to India from the Arctic Circle back in 8000 BC. M.S. Golwalkar said RSS Tilak, right about Arctic origin, but the North Pole was in India at that time. So there are a lot of different assumptions that were made. Swami Vivekananda said Aryans came from India and ancient India included Afghanistan. Sri Aurobindo said Dravidian languages closely related to Sanskrit. So there have been different views and counter views to this. One man who's been championing the cause of the fact that you have to look at this linguistically, and if you look at historical facts, the absence of archaeological facts, is that the reverse stands to be true. And for a long time it was thought that civilization, knowledge evolved in India and then moved out of India to other regions towards the west. That's what happened. Earlier this week, I was in conversation with the very same man who's also now penciled this. Still no trace of an Aryan invasion. It's a collection of Indo-European origins. The man is Dr. Koenraad Elst. Listen in. For those who followed his works, he needs no introduction. He's been perhaps for decades a lone warrior against those championing the Aryan invasion theory. Koenraad Elst is an author, historian, but somebody who's also now wanting to put out the facts scientifically where we as Bharat can be proud of our heritage, our knowledge, and this went from here to the world, out of India. It didn't come from outside into India. Now, that's something which he's believed in. There are many who follow his works and listen to him, but we've had the pleasure of him with us in person in studio. So, thank you very much and namaste. It's fantastic to have you. Let me first ask you, those who champion the Aryan invasion theory, are they being economical with history? Because history for us is very muddled. So let's start from where it all started. So does Bharat's heritage, Vedic knowledge, predate the Indus Valley civilization? Let's start from there.
Yes, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that those who believe in the Aryan invasion theory are necessarily economical with the truth. You see, they do not have to have evil motives. Usually, they just believe that this gives the best account of the data. And so I think they're wrong, but I think on the whole they're honest. I mean, there is this conspiracy theory that I hear a lot in India. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's all colonial racism and so on. No. You see the colonial administrators at the time, and then later the National Socialists in Germany, and then all the anti-Hindu movements in India started making political use of it. But that's not how the theory came about. I mean, the idea that politicians can concoct a scholarly theory and with that convince all the specialists who then start to propagate your theory. I mean, that's not how it works. You know, so the theory is quite honest, only I think it's wrong.
But what is the genesis of this theory? Because for our research, or my team tells me that sometime in the 19th century, this was first propounded. And this was around the time when many say that the Adam or Ram Setu got renamed Adam's Bridge. And this whole talk about Adam actually landed on earth in Sri Lanka and then made his way, used this bridge and came to India and took the knowledge to. So all of that started being perpetrated by the same group which till a few years earlier have mentioned that same bridge as Ram Setu. So did it happen around the same time? So was there a larger narrative to try and fit India as part of a rising European conquest?
No, I don't think in this case the Christian or the biblical factor is that important. You see, when the Portuguese colonized their part of India, then Christianity was still supreme in their minds. When the British came, it was still a factor, but not the only one. And so in the genesis of this theory, it's less important, although it was started by a Catholic missionary, a Frenchman working in Andhra Pradesh, Gaston Laurent Coeur-Doux, a Jesuit. And so in 1767, he sent a paper to the Academy in Paris in which he showed that Latin and Greek were related to Sanskrit. Then immediately it took quite a flight because the famous French freethinker Voltaire took it. And so he made it public and he pointed out that the origins of European culture are actually on the banks of the Ganga. Now, with that, incidentally, he also set the trend in that the Aryan invasion theory was immediately instrumentalized for an ideological agenda. In his case, he was an Enlightenment thinker, very much against the church. So what point he was trying to make was, well, the origin was not in the Bible. And so ever since, you see a number of different points have been sought to be made through the Aryan invasion theory. Or no. Through the Indo-European family theory. There was no Aryan invasion theory yet. Sorry, here I have to correct myself. At that time, in the early period, the dominant thought was that India was the homeland. And so it had a rivalry from Christian, Bible thumpers who tried to link it to the Ark of Noah, which landed in Armenia. And they thought that the Indo-European speakers were the descendants of Japheth, who is one of the sons of Noah. So they came from Armenia. But the general thought was that India was the homeland. And so this started changing around 1830, 1840. So for 60, 70 years, the out of India theory was the dominant theory. And so when I read here in India that people say, oh, it's a concoction by the Hindu nationalists.
Yeah.
Now, come on, you see. It was thought of by the cream of of European intellectuals at the time. So this was the dominant theory. Then, for certain linguistic insights, they started thinking, maybe it's not India. Then one fellow called August Schlegel proposed it was around the Caucasus Mountains. And so it has moved around a little bit, but essentially that's where it has remained till today. So the dominant version of the Aryan invasion theory says that the homeland was in southwestern Russia, Ukraine, so close to the Caucasus Mountains still. The American geneticist David Reich has a few years ago made headlines by proposing the other side of the Caucasus Mountains to the south. But so it's always in that vicinity. So not India. I mean, all these different versions have this in common, that in order to get into India, they have to invade.
Right. So let's come to what is your assessment and what is your finding? Why do you believe that this is out of India, and do we have scientific proof, genetic proof, to say, hey, stop pushing this because this is the reality. Out of India is the truth. It all happened here.
Yes, well, you see, the genetic proof is overrated. It has a role to play, but it's not that important. So linguistics, where it all started, has practically no place in Indian universities.
Right.
And people don't study that. They study engineering, and maybe after that they may study history or philosophy or so. But so that's like, that's a second choice. And so when archaeology started to play a role, now that was already taken more seriously. Now genetics, now here the real hard scientists can do their bit. However, genetics is not that important. Why? Well, because genes don't speak. And so people can change language even though they retain their genes. And so especially. You see, in India, since 2018, there has been a lot of talk that finally genetics has proven the Aryan invasion.
Correct.
Like this is told very explicitly in this book by Tony Joseph, where he argues, you see, yes, the homeland was there in Eastern Europe and they came into India. Now, what is the case? You see, this David Reich has shown that there was an influx of population, genetically identifiable, and datable to some 1800, 1700 BC. So Tony Joseph and many others, were applauding, oh, finally, you see the proof of the Aryan invasion theory. Well, maybe, you see, if he's correct, because there are also geneticists who disagree, but not being a geneticist, you see, I'm not going to quarrel with him. Probably he's correct, but so what? You see, many groups have come into India. You have the Scythians, the Greeks, the Huns, the Kushanas, the Turks. They all left their genes here, but not their language. So they all assimilated linguistically. Even if they managed to keep their religion, you see, in language they assimilated. So here, you see, the thesis is that, the Aryans were totally different. They came, a small group came into India, and this entire very large population, they managed to completely convert all of them to their own language. Well, you see, let there have been an influx of people. What we do know for sure is that they were not the Aryans.
They were not the
Aryans meaning people who speak Indo-European, in the case of India, essentially Sanskrit. Because, you see, and this is an absolutely fundamental piece of information, the chronology of the Vedas doesn't fit.
Right.
You see, It has been said since the late 19th century that the invasion took place around 1500 BC. The Vedas are a bit younger, maybe 1200 BC. Now, this was an estimate by Friedrich Max Müller,
Yes.
who was a very big name at the time. And so when he suggested that, everybody thought, oh, this must be the truth.
True.
Whereas among specialists, people said, but Mr. Müller, you see, this is, what is this based on? And so his own pupil, Moritz Winternitz, said, but, you know, this is not realistic. The entire evolution from early Vedas to, let's say, the Buddha, you can't cram that into a few centuries. So the Rig Veda is not from 1200 BC.
Great.
It's from at least 1,000 years earlier, or even more. And then you have a number of data in the Vedas, namely astronomical, where you see there is a very slow cycle, the precession cycle. I'm not going to technically explain it. But so it allows you to roughly, give or take a century, estimate when certain stellar positions took place. Now, there aren't that many, but there are a number of data like this, and all of them converge on a higher chronology, with the Rig Veda starting 3000 BC thereabouts.
Right.
And so then there are archaeological data, like the drying up of the Saraswati,
Yes.
which is a big river in the Rig Veda. So that happens earlier, namely earlier than 1900 BC. Then in the Mahabharata, it's only a rivulet, it's hardly worth talking about. So that's after 1900 BC. But so the point is, there are a number of archaeological data, archaeoastronomical data, that all confirm, that all converge on a higher chronology. And there is absolutely no information that confirms Max Müller's chronology.
So if you were to look at linguistic data, now if you take the Bhagavad Gita,
Yes.
the Bhagavad Gita recently, they celebrated 5,550 years of the Bhagavad Gita as per the Hindu calendar.
I disagree.
That itself, you may disagree with the date and time, but that itself hints at the fact that this knowledge, which is supposed to be a summary of all the knowledges that's been passed over the ages, is at least 2,000 to 3,000 years old, give or take. You know, the argument here and there, some may say 5,000, some may say 2,000, but it's older than what the Indus Valley civilization dates itself to, based on the archaeological remains. So that itself, doesn't it give ground that Sanskrit was part of spoken in this region much before the so-called Aryan invasion and also the fall of the Indus Valley civilization?
Well, you see, there you have one of the reasons why the rest of the world isn't taking this new evidence sufficiently seriously. Why? Because it is also contaminated by a certain discourse among Hindus that is much less than scientific.
Okay.
And so, for example, the idea that the Mahabharata, including the Bhagavad Gita, dates to the 32nd century BC, that's untenable, and it's explainable why this mistake came about, but it's a mistake.
Right.
You see, this chronology dates from about 500 AD.
Okay.
It's not based on anything in the Mahabharata itself. And, you know, it's a mistake. You know, you have quite a few of these magnifications in Hinduism. Like, for instance, the 4 yugas. You see, that's a system that's based on a division in time of the precession cycle.
Right.
So, which is 25,772 years. This was rounded off to 24,000 years. And then fractions of that, you know, were deemed to be the duration of these yugas that existed already thousands of years before, but without such a duration attached. So the initial duration that is ascribed to Markandeya has the Kali Yuga at like 12,000 years. But then the Puranic poets, you see, out of awe for everything heavenly, said, yeah, but you see, a year for a man is only a day for the gods.
Yeah.
So we have to multiply everything by 360. So then you get these unwieldy numbers like 432,000 years and so
Right.
on. So they're an interesting literary device, but they have no historical value.
Value.
So here, and you see, this for many Hindus is apparently very difficult. You know, here you have to outgrow these traditions or these invented traditions. They're not based on the Mahabharata. They were invented only like 1500 years ago. And you see, they spoil the otherwise very good case for a higher chronology and therefore against the Aryan invasion theory.
So where did Sanskrit, if you say linguistic proof, it shows that Sanskrit was spoken here.
Yeah.
So where did Sanskrit, who propounded Sanskrit? And then there is also this concept of those who were inhabitants, original inhabitants of this land, were pushed south of the Vindhyas because of the invasion. And those who went to the south of the Vindhyas then perpetrated the Tamil culture or the Dravidian culture, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Whereas this was the Aryan culture. So this Aryan versus Dravidian is also because of the Vindhyas that separates quite literally us into North and South India. So how do you say, where did Sanskrit then origin?
Well,
Who
you see,
propounded it?
there is no sign that the population was pushed south. It is possible that there was Dravidian spoken also in North India, not entirely in North India. There was certainly no Dravidian spoken in the Vedic area, in Haryana, Punjab. But on the coast of Gujarat, Maharashtra, there probably, yes, there was Dravidian spoken. So that has generally been, phased out. People took over the dominant Indo-European language, whereas in the south they maintained it, although their languages were also influenced by Sanskrit, having taken over much vocabulary. Now, for all practical purposes, they were always there, although there are theories that say, oh, but the Dravidians have invaded. You know, only a bit earlier, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, but somehow there was nobody in India. A recent genetic finding is that the Mundas, like the present president Draupadi Murmu is a Santal, so this Munda language group, that invaded or immigrated into India, and less than 4,000 years ago, about exactly the time that is always attributed to the Aryan invasion.
Why is it that it's being brought about now again? Why is this entire Aryan invasion theory being brought up once again? Once the conversation was settled, why is it being raked up again?
Well, since the British time, the Aryan invasion theory has always been here. It's not even the Hindu nationalists who opposed it. Like Savarkar accepted it simply because it was too strong. It was all the prestige of Western scholarship was behind it. Tilak, Balagangadhar Tilak even invented his own version of the Aryan invasion theory.
Pole.
Yes. So it was very much there, and yeah, nobody made an issue of it. After all, so many countries have a story of invasion or conquest, like the United States par excellence. And still there are nationalists and so on. So it's possible to have an Indian nation even if you are invaders. But nevertheless, the Aryan invasion theory was so politicized against Hindus by the Dravidianists, by the Ambedkarites, not by Ambedkar himself, who was against the Aryan invasion theory, but by his followers, by the Christian missionaries, by the secularists. And so when scholars in the 1980s, 90s came up with discoveries that pleaded against the Aryan invasion, then of course Hindu nationalists were quite happy. They jumped on the bandwagon. But it's not they who invented it. And so right now, because of their enthusiasm for upcoming evidence against the Aryan invasion theory, therefore polemicists on the other side are now also waking up and becoming more active and defending their version.
So it boils down to linguistics more than genetics is what you're saying.
Yes.
And we just need to go back a little and try and understand where our origins are. It all started here. So when we go to the world and say, this is what is our wealth and this is what we'd like to share with you, don't try and pass it off as somebody's borrowed wealth or somebody has given it. Let's try and correct it. Koenraad Elst, thank you so much. Thank you very much. This is a short conversation, but with the promise of extracting far more from you. I'll take your leave. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you.
Namaste.